Chapter 8. The smile on the high priest's face. The great God had spoken. Messengers on the fastest horses in the stables were sent south to Cush. Shabbataka would know what to do. Chariots from stables all along the Nile began to roll into Thebes. Word was sent to the ironsmiths in every town and village to convert their shops into arms factories, to work through the night, hammering the spearheads and the arrowheads and the sword blades into shape. The order for conscription went out through the land of Egypt. Taharka was tense as a tight-drawn rope. When the army arrived from Cush, he was going to war. What did he know of foreign wars? For that matter, what did any of them know of this war they were going to fight? Who among them had ever faced the Assyrians? The Assyrians who had conquered Babylon? Who among them knew anything about them outside of children's stories and wild rumors passed along from mouth to mouth? The general of the armies was as ignorant as he himself. Taharka sent for Amos. Amos might tell them what they would have to face. I've never faced them, but I know a man who has. Here, in Thebes, bring him to me. The man Amos brought to him was the most outlandish person Taharka had ever seen. He was a man still young. His face was fair, what he could see of it. It was partly covered by a beard of golden brown, which was also the color of his hair. His eyes were blue. Taharka had never before seen a blue-eyed man. This is Talos, said Amos. He comes from a town called Corinth, across the Sea of the North. It was obvious that Talos, unlike the man from Judah, thought that Taharka just might be a god. He was taking no chances. He was down on his knees, staring hard at the floor. How do you come to know so much about the Assyrians? The king asked him. Careful not to look too far upwards, the man ventured to reply. I am a trader, great one. Pottery, bronzes, dyes, some ironware too, he added proudly. I go everywhere. I speak all the tongues. I was in the city of Samaria, capital of Israel, when the Assyrians struck. I was younger then, or I might not have come out alive. Taharka leaned forward. Tell me, he said. Talos spread out his hands. He closed his eyes, as if conjuring up a picture buried in his mind. Row upon row, column upon column of men. They covered the horizon. They blotted out the sun. Spearmen, bowmen, swordsmen, all iron swords. Pikemen, slingers. They wore shirts of iron scales. And the horses, not just chariots, but men on horseback who can strike where they will. Horse soldiers? We could do that, thought Taharka. Our messengers ride horses. We could get new horses, find men to train them, if we had the time. And towers. Towers on wheels. Towers? On wheels? They carry great pointed battering rams. No wall, no gate can stand against them. And on top of the towers stand archers who can pick off the defenders on the wall like ducks. They will be of no use against us, said Taharka, though for a moment he felt chilled. We will meet them in the open. Spoken like a king, said Amos. But you must know the odds, the numbers. How many men can the Assyrian king bring up against us? I have heard that he commands 100,000. Taharka could bring up 20,000 from Cush. Here in Egypt it was not sure. We must double the conscription, he said. 2 men out of every 10. And there will be our Philistine vassals, said Amos, the men of Ashkelon, Ekron, Gath. Talos shook his head sadly. I have not yet told you what happened to Samaria. The walls, thick as the height of a tall man, were smashed like eggshells. The great house of Hosea the king was gutted by fire, the houses burned to the ground. I saw the great men of the city herded into the square and slain, impaled on stakes. I saw all the people of the town, the children too, with ropes around their necks, herded out at the heels of the army. I myself only escaped because I amused them, an alien barbarian with pale eyes. May I never come so close again. There was silence in the chamber of the god. For a moment, Taharka was back in Napata, listening to Mbuta. They cut down young trees and put our necks in the forks with a bar of iron across and roped us together. But those men had not been the men of Assyria. Those men had been the men of Cush. He shivered. Evil was evil, wherever it arose, and this evil was the evil of the Assyrians. He beckoned Talos close. Now, he said, I will call in my army advisors. You must think back. You must think hard. I must have more than this. You must tell me everything you can remember, how they were commanded, how they were deployed. I must have numbers. I must know how they will attack. The men met far into the night while the trader from Corinth searched his memory back over the years. Later, the darkness of Talos' story hung over Taharka like a heavy shadow. Perhaps that was why the real shadows of the great house seemed sinister the next day, why the smile on the face of the high priest of Ammon somehow chilled him, why there even seemed a touch of insolence in the manner of the captain who guarded his chamber. He shook off the feeling as well as he could. Even now, there were other things to think about. For, all of a sudden it seemed, the time of the great ceremony was upon them. In 3 days he would be a married man. He was 16 years old, and he knew that, deep down, he was a little frightened. But his love for his childhood companion helped him now. The future was dark and confused. Danger and strife and terrible loneliness lay ahead. But for a little while, at least, he would be happy. He would wrap himself in a magic spell of happiness. He and Shepnu saw each other that afternoon for the first time in several days. They were to make the final offering before the ceremony to the image of Isis, god of marriage. And there, before the image, the spell was broken. "Hari," said Shepnu, and only he could hear her, "I'm afraid." The fear in her voice was not like his fear, the fear before the marriage. This was a cold fear, like the smile on the high priest's face. He waited. As the voice rose in the chant, she whispered again, "I've heard something. I have to talk to you, but I think they're watching me." The thought of the dead taster drifted through Taharka's mind. "Try to come tonight," he said, and he stopped, for this was the worst of all. Among all of them out there, advisors, servants, guards, there was no one he was sure he could trust. "Bring Amos with you." Something seemed to have spoken for him.